Ian Falconer was born in Ridgefield, Connecticut. He studied art history at NYU and painting at Parsons. Somebody is here who teaches at Parsons, right? Yeah. At Parsons and at the Otis Art Institute. Ian's done numerous covers for the New Yorker magazine, and he's designed sets and costumes for the New York City Ballet, San Francisco Opera, the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden, and among others. He's also the author and illustrator of the Olivia book series. Up until about a year ago, Ian lived 3 short blocks from here on West 9th Street. But sadly, he deserted us to go live in the Hollywood Hills. Happily, he's agreed to be with us here today via live stream. Let's hope there aren't too many technical glitches. Ian, thanks so much for coming. Like magic here, and there he is. Hi, Ian.
Yes. Oh, it's Ian.
Hey, listen, what we really want to know is what's the temperature out there?
It's about 68.
Oh, God.
Incidentally, I didn't leave you to go live in the Hollywood Hills. My apartment burned down, and I couldn't afford to find the space that I needed in New York now. It's a real problem. There are no artists left in New York. So,
you really think we believe that, Ian? Well, I miss you a lot myself, and we all wish you were closer. But anyway, this is great. I have to tell you that the last week I've been revisiting your books, and it's been a total blast. Somehow along the way, I'd missed Olivia Forms a Band, but I went to Books of Wonder and picked that up, and so I got to cover the whole Olivia over the last week. And I have to say they're even better than I remembered. Generally, when somebody writes a really successful book and they start doing follow-ups, the quality tends to trail off pretty quickly. But I really found that's not the case at all with your books. In fact, the last one, Olivia and the Fairy Princesses, seemed to me one of the funniest you ever did, and maybe more subversive than most of them. I love the way you kind of skewered the whole cloying genre of fairy princess books.
Thank you.
But anyway, let's go to the first book. Could you tell us something about the genesis of your wonderful, headstrong little pig?
It was started as my niece was the first grandchild in our family, and she just captivated us all, and she was a very funny, very vivacious little kid. I don't think probably that much out of the ordinary, but because mothers all come up to me and say, my child is exactly like Olivia, and so kids are amazing things to watch growing. And the first one that you have, it is the first grandchild. This is my first niece, and that learning curve, the watching them like pick up stuff really fast, and so I started doing drawings, and for some reason it ended up like a pig, except she's got like she had like this turned up nose and looked kind of pigular.
Ian, that's a question I had further down the line, but you might as well answer it now. I was going to ask you why it was a pig. Is it really because of her turned up nose?
Yeah, and piglets are. Well, I like pigs. They're very intelligent. But piglets. She looked like a piglet. She doesn't now. I mean, she's very pretty.
But go on about the genesis of how you created.
Oh yes, so I spent actually I was working on New Yorker stuff, and I'd spent a couple of years working on this idea for a book. I thought this could be better than just like some little I was going to do it as a Christmas present for Olivia, my niece, and I thought it could be something more. So, and I had a friend who, this is the early days of I guess 20 years ago. It's the early days of computers and things. So I had a friend who worked in advertising, and he helped me put it together digitally using my drawings, and then and I finally I thought this was pretty good, and I took it to it was a woman at what's the talent agency?
William Morris?
What's that?
William Morris, maybe?
William Morris, and they just started a children's book division, and this woman, I can't remember her name, but she said, "Well, it's not an Eloise yet. Never going to get published if you first time author, you're never going to get published. So I want to put you together with somebody who's already established, and you can illustrate their story." And I actually have this idea for this character, and I really think it will be good. And I put it in a drawer for about 6 months until I got a call from Ann Schwartz at Simon & Schuster, and she had seen my New Yorker drawings and asked if I would be interested in illustrating a book. So I brought them this book that I'd had stuck away, and they liked it and worked with it. So it was amazing. I mean, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, it really was amazing. Can we pause here for a second, because
Sure.
I have a feeling you're going to disappear for a minute, but I had a feeling that most of the people in this audience are involved with the MFA writing program here at the New School, and so most of them are slanted toward writing. And I thought some of them might not know your New Yorker covers, so I was your face is going to go away for a minute, and I'm going to show them a few of your covers, just in case.
You can still hear me there, right?
Okay, so you'll still be connected, but wait.
Okay.
I don't know how many of you know Ian's covers, but I'm going to show you 8 or 9 of them. I love that one. I don't know if it has a name. It might be called The Evolution of Man, but anyway.
I can't remember.
Now, Ian, I'm showing you the one that they called Art Appreciation.
Oh, is that the little lady in the Chanel? I can't see what he's showing you, so I'm
Yeah, this is this little woman in the Chanel suit has graced, I don't know how many New Yorker covers, probably
I think 4.
4. I personally love this one.
What is it?
Sorry. This is the one with the theater marquee.
Oh, yes. You have to go really close into that. Each little, I don't know if you can see, but I went through the thesaurus and found every word that
every pejorative,
every
adjective.
Negative.
And now I'm showing the one that I think was called The Competition. It's the Beauty Queens, and has Miss New York.
Oh, right.
Looking
Yeah.
like Miss New York. Yeah.
Yeah. Not Texas at all.
As a skier, I love this one. I've often felt much like your wonderful little old lady, surrounded by snowboarders.
She's sort of based on my grandmother.
Is she? And as somebody who goes out to the end of Long Island, I love this one too.
Oh, is that the airplanes?
That's the airplanes. The great thing about Ian's covers is that you don't really need to know what they're about. You can just look at them and get it in one fell swoop, which must be really hard to do. Come up with these ideas.
I come to you.
Now I'm showing the one at Giverny.
Oh yeah. Ugly Americans. Yeah.
Now, this one was, I think, a Valentine's Day cover, which is appropriate for this week. And I think they called it Heart Attack, but it's Cupid sitting up on the edge of a building.
Oh, right, yeah.
He smokes cigarettes and eats donuts and stuff.
Yeah, good perspective, that one.
Yeah. And this is a very recent one for, I think, last year's Fashion Week. And that's the little old lady again. Same one. I think they called this one Stiff Competition.
Right, yeah.
Are you doing one for this week?
I'm sorry?
Are you doing one for Fashion Week this week?
I hope it's 2 weeks away. But,
no, it's right now.
Well, I know, but the cover is not this, because they're doing an Oscar cover first.
Oh, are they? Oh, I see. Okay, great. Anyway, well, that was a few of your New Yorker covers, so we're going to come back to you now. Magic. Well, I was going to ask you about your adventure in getting your first book published, but you sort of included that in the last answer, I guess. Pretty much.
Yeah. No, Ann Schwartz was a wonderful editor, and she changed a lot of things, but she really tightened it up into a very tight little parcel. That first book was very economical.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. I wondered, you had a lot more text originally, and she pared it down a bit?
I had a few more drawings, and some of them were just gratuitously silly things that she just, they weren't necessary. And a really good editor is an amazing thing to have.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah.
Saves you from your own, excesses.
I was going to ask you to tell us a little bit about your niece that inspired her, but you've sort of touched on that already. Is she particularly willful and headstrong and all that? She
is still, yes. She's actually a fairly ordinary kid. She's not super intellectual or anything. She's just a very she's smart, but she's not going to be Maria Callas or well,
is her name Olivia?
Eleanor Roosevelt or what?
Is her name Olivia?
Yes.
Yeah, she is. Okay.
Yeah. All the names are real in the books. They're all my nephews and nieces and the dog and cat are the same.
Is there a nephew named Ian?
Yes.
Named after you?
Yeah.
I've known you.
Which is an interesting story. Because I have two younger sisters, and the youngest, who was 6 years younger than me, was had Olivia, and the one who's a year younger than me had not had any children yet, but she'd always wanted to name her first boy Ian after me because we were very close growing up, and my youngest sister snagged it and. Happy families.
Does the older of your sisters now have kids?
Yeah, she's got two boys.
And are you going to do a book for one of them?
Well, she wants me to, and I had one that I was working on, but it got all my computer and all the drawings I'd done got destroyed in the fire. So it's like, do I want to start that all over again?
Oh, that's really terrible. I didn't realize you'd lost a lot of work in that fire.
Not a lot, but that was gone.
Well, I've known you a long time, and I always thought of you as a visual guy, which you are, of course. But
I've been 35 years now.
Yeah, I know. Let's not go into that. And you went to school with my cousin, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. But
it looks very much like him.
But I always thought of you as this visual guy. And then when I read the first Olivia book, I was completely blown away because you're such a good writer. And I wondered, I'm really curious about this. Which do you enjoy more, the writing or the drawing?
Well, I get a general idea of the way the story is going to go, and then I draw it first to get it so that the pages turn visually, surprises coming on the next page and and then I sort of it's pretty minimal text, so it's not War and Peace, but But I think it works better for a picture book. It should the drawing should draw you into it first, because the kids can't read the text yet; they're being read it, and
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that. I was remembering as a kid, my mom was always playing musical comedy records, and I'd always ask her, it'd be Rodgers and Hammerstein or Lerner and Lowe, and I'd always ask her, do they write the music first or do they write the words first? And she could never answer that. I subsequently learned that usually Oscar Hammerstein would write "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning" or "The Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Music," and then Richard Rodgers would sit down and do the music. But when I was reading your books this last week, I kept wondering about that, whether you do the pictures first or the text first, or does it flip-flop?
It goes back and forth. You have to have some kind of story, some kind of idea of what the story is going to be, and how it's going to happen on 32 pages, self-ended, and then you try and fit this, and you get a blank book. You get all the pages going, and then you start cutting, doing sketches and cutting them out and sticking them in roughly, and getting it to the point where you can actually say, this is where the text needs to be for this, and this is going to be a surprise with a banger line at the end to anyway.
But you really actually do all the drawings first, as a rule.
Yeah, well, I get them in place first. I may not finish the drawings first, but I get everything in place, visually in place first, going through the book. But we were talking about whether the.
Well, I'm talking about the actual process of creating these books. The actual, sitting down and doing them. Do you think in terms of the pictures or the words? And I think you think more in terms of the words, the pictures, I guess.
Yes, I do. I try and keep the text as tight and minimal as possible.
But it's still, the text is great often, and it's not easy to do that. But do you ever get a visual idea that's so irresistible that you kind of build a whole book around it? I was thinking about the one about the circus and Olivia on the trampoline, which is such a brilliant, I don't know if any of you have read that. I hope most of you have read that book, but in fact, maybe I could show them. Wait a second. Can you see it? Because what's so amazing about this to me is when he has Olivia go down, her imprint on the trampoline is so perfect.
I have to say that was actually stolen from a short Disney cartoon of Goofy on a trampoline from the 1940s.
What was it stolen from?
A Disney cartoon of Goofy.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. But I guess my question is, do you ever get just this irresistible visual idea and then figure out a whole book around it?
Not really. No, I think it's more. There are moments. Yeah, I guess, but it's not just one drawing. It's many moments that you thought of. They tend to come first. Those big. What do you call them? Set pieces or something.
Right. I read an article about you, and it quoted Ann Schwartz as saying that you instinctively get kids. Why do you think that is? Is it because you observe them really closely, or?
Yeah, well, it's a resistance to growing up, I think, which many people have. Many artists have that, I think. You're all grown up now, but you have a child and all that sort of thing. I kind of have been allowed to maintain my irresponsible.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
You're still playing in the sandbox.
I remember that sandbox.
I'm sure a lot of people have commented on the sort of little adult touches in your books like the Degas and the Pollock in the first one, and the wonderful poster of Eleanor Roosevelt in the second one, and the picture of Martha Graham in one of them, and you have Olivia reading about Maria Callas in one. She's dreaming about the Supreme Court in one of them, that kind of thing. Did you get any grief about that from your editor, about these sophisticated touches?
No, not really. I think they enjoyed that. One of the things is that these parents generally have to read picture books. They have to read them over and over and over again. So it's nice to have something. And also the kid doesn't know what that is, so the parents will explain it to them. I'm sorry, there was something else I was going to say on this, but I can't remember.
Well, I was thinking maybe you were sort of amusing yourself a little bit. You were
that's I think the key to making good art is amusing yourself. If you have the confidence that you know what's good or whatever, you amuse yourself. It of course means being very hard on yourself, but it's that's.
Yeah.
I figure that if I think it's funny, other people will think it's funny. So maybe that's hubris, but I think it's true. It's
well, it seems to be borne out.
It's at least organic, and that doesn't make much sense. But
yeah, for the Venice book, that was the other one I hadn't read before this week. Actually, you'd given me a copy, but I'd never looked at it before this week. But I was wondering, and I really loved it. But did you go to Venice and stay there for a while when you were doing it?
I went for about a month.
Oh, how great!
And stayed there. It was winter. It was off season, and there was water up to my hips. But it was nice to see it with no people there. Be there with no people in there, and so the actual journey that they take through when they're going through the town, it's all logical. It's all ending up under the Bridge of Sighs and all that. And when I was there, there's a bookseller near the opera that has they sell antique books and photographs of Venice, and so I bought a lot of those, and and I ended up using those hand tinted photographs for the backgrounds of Venice, which is
yeah. I had a bit of a kind of Proustian moment when I was reading that book, because at one point I think it's the Rialto Bridge, you have a banner that says Tiepolo on it.
Yeah.
Is that the Rialto Bridge?
Yeah, there's always a banner that says Tiepolo or Guardi or something on the bridge. They exhibitions that.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll remember this, but I'm going probably back to the 1980s, and you and I were invited to an opening at the Metropolitan Museum, and it was one of those ones where you walk up the great staircase, and then they siphon you off to the left somewhere. Mm-hmm. And it was just the two of us, and I don't even remember what the show was. Maybe you will, but you pulled me aside and took me into the European galleries and pointed up at a little painting, and it was a Tiepolo. And I fancy myself as very good on Italian painting. I was in school in Florence for 8 months and studied with the head of the Uffizi and whatnot. But I'd never really looked. I'd always dismissed Tiepolo as, all these clouds and putti and all that crap. And I thought it was just horrible. And standing there with you, looking at this one, I suddenly sort of got it a bit. And it gave me this great respect for your eye, the way you actually look at things, instead of just taking them in the way a lot of people do. But it really gave me, a little kind of frisson, remembering that far back. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah. Well, there is at the top of those stairs, there is a room with Tiepolos in it, or it used to be a room of Tiepolos. But I think they've still got the big one up there. But yeah.
Yeah.
I looked Tiepolo when I was 14 years old, which I guess says gay, gay, gay. But
yeah,
no, I really did. I mean, I thought it was. I love light art. Light artwork. It's not easy to do. It's incredibly hard to do.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Who was the actor who said?
In some of your sets that I've been looking at, I've noticed there are moments that are Tiepolo-esque, but Anyway, enough about Tiepolo. But it really got to me the other night when I was thinking about that. To change the subject a little bit, I was wondering, were there certain books you loved as a kid? I mean, when I first read your books, I thought of Eloise immediately. And so you must have liked Eloise, but what were the sort of books you liked?
It's too long. I think it should be cut in half, but it's very good drawings. I love his artwork, Hilary Knight, and there's too many skibbity doodles and skibbity dees and all that.
Yeah, I think the K. Thompson text could use a bit of Ann Schwartz's cutting.
Head shears.
But are there some other books you liked as a kid? I'm sure there were.
Yeah, one I always remember, well, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble, I think, is a beautiful book.
Yeah.
And Maurice Sendak's Higgledy Piggledy Pop is always, it's beautifully drawn, and it's a wonderful sort of bittersweet, sad, melancholy story. It's very odd for children, but it's beautiful to read, and we loved it as kids because it's quite funny. And
you know, Maurice isn't with us anymore, but he would love that you said that because that was his favorite of all the books he ever did. He liked it better than Where the Wild Things Are.
What's that?
He liked it better than Where the Wild Things Are. He thought it was his greatest book.
Well, I told him that once. I just talking to him on the phone. I told him that, and he said, "That's my favorite too."
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody else understands that that's the best one.
Any others? Favorite childhood books?
Well, I'm very fond of Dr. Seuss. I love his drawings, and I love the ridiculous, all those birds with those headdresses that go in tears up, and McElligot's Pool, and yeah.
Yeah.
He's one of the few people who could actually, his own style, he could just do so many different things. The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins, and I think they tried to animate that, but you can't do that. You can't do it with his drawing style in digital. It doesn't translate into 3 dimensions. You could do it if you were still doing cell animation, which is hand drawn, but you can't do it anymore.
Did you ever get to meet Theodor Geisel?
I'm sorry?
Did you ever meet him?
No. I think he died a while ago, didn't he?
It was a while back, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, I've been to Springfield, Mass. and La Jolla, California, and both those towns claim him and have little sculpture gardens about him. But I think he was born in Springfield and then ended up living in La Jolla. But anyway.
So they're bronze.
Have you been to the one in Springfield?
No.
Oh, it's great. It's great. They have it's a playground for kids, but all the bronze sculptures are Dr. Seuss figures. Speaking of your childhood, this is a bit of a sidebar here, but I heard that I know you were born in Ridgefield, but did you spend part of your time growing up, you and your family, on an island?
Yeah, we lived on an island in Long Island Sound, off near Norwalk, in Norwalk, Connecticut. Incredibly beautiful, but it wasn't fancy then. It was the whole East Coast is from Washington to Maine is now just jammed. But it wasn't very expensive, but it was quite beautiful and grand and wild as well. And what else about? Was it isolated? I mean, did you feel? It was, but I was already that kind of person, and so maybe that fed into it. I'm still kind of a loner and reclusive.
Right. I wondered about that because I know you. I prefer
hearing my own voice than other people's.
Interesting. I want to go visit it sometime. Does your family still have a place there?
Yeah, they live. That side of my mother's side of the family all live within this. The Darien, Norwalk, Westport area. They all live practically spitting distance from each other. And they live about half a mile away from where that island used to be.
Huh.
It's very pretty. It's very pretty up there.
Well, I've been to those Thimble Islands, but I don't think I've ever been to that one.
Thimble Islands are stunning.
They're amazing too. Yeah. You've twice collaborated with David Sedaris. Once a play, the Santaland Diaries, which I got to see and loved, and once this book, which is up on the. We have a table of your books, by the way, in front of where your image is. How was it collaborating with David Sedaris?
Oh, he's marvelous. He's very easy and laid back, and whatever you do, he likes. Well, he didn't like the rabbit I did because he talked about the story talks about a rabbit with pink eyes, and well, white rabbits are the only ones with pink eyes. But what he was thinking of was these scrappy little rabbits that he would see around his house in France. The wild rabbits, that are lean and mean looking, not the fluffy pink things. So I redrew that with a mean looking rabbit.
You've spent a lot. I know that you've spent a lot of time with the great English artist David Hockney. Has he had any influence whatsoever on your illustrating?
I suppose in one way, in that he tends to work like an illustrator when he paints. Unlike traditional painting, where you get all the layers of dark and lights in immediately, he tends to work in pieces. He'll do a face and a body, which is unorthodox, and it does have a distinctive look about it. But some people would call it an illustrational look.
Well, he says that himself. I've heard him say that.
Yeah?
Yeah. But I mean, what I was wondering is, there are certain things, I think what I was thinking of is...
about himself?
Yeah, I've heard David say that.
Really?
Yeah. But that was a long time ago. Maybe he's... But I was wondering, because you have this way of simplifying your artwork so that you really have the focus on something. And David sometimes does that too. And I just wondered about...
Well, that's one of the powers that you have as an artist or you should use as an artist, is telling people where to look. You can do that non-verbally. You can tell them where to look.
Yeah.
But a writer can do that too, can't they?
Absolutely. Speaking of that, you're so much humor in your work. E.B. White said that.
So what?
Can you hear me? E.B. White said that analyzing humor writing is like dissecting a frog.
It's like what?
Like dissecting a frog. Few people are interested, and the frog dies of it. You ever hear that quote?
No. If you've ever told a joke and people sort of don't really get it, and then you try and explain it, and it's.
Yeah. But I wondered, nevertheless, in spite of that, is there some in analyzing humor? Is there you're so funny in your writing? Do you have any tips, advice for writing humor?
That's a terrible thing to ask.
Do you want me to retract the question?
No, it's just that I think I think they're more and more discovering that humor is a form of madness that you have to see. You have to have that sense of absurdity already in you to because they come up without you even thinking about it. Honestly, in conversation, you come out with something that you haven't thought about it yet, but it blurts out of your mouth. That happens to me all the time, and it's sometimes very embarrassing. I've been sued.
I think that's a really good answer to that question. I think you should, add it to the list of questions you ask people to ask you. Speaking of humor, I'm sure your books have been translated into lots and lots of languages. I'm just curious, because, the French, for example, have a totally different sense of humor from the English and Americans and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do your books sell the best? What countries? Obviously America, but I mean, other than that.
Spanish countries like them a lot. So Spanish-speaking countries. So South America and Mexico and Spain and they've been Portuguese, Brazil and Portugal. They like them a
Really
lot.
interesting, huh? Could you tell us some of the current practitioners in picture books that you admire?
Yeah, I don't really read other people's books. I hate to say it, but I don't.
Well, that's a good answer, yeah.
But I think that's true for a lot of artists, that if it's not important to you and what you're doing, it's not of interest necessarily. It helps you somehow. Yeah. I'll keep up and I'll steal a lot too. But no, I'm kidding. I'm going to steal a lot. But
That's a good answer. I've never seen the Nickelodeon TV show of Olivia.
Go there.
But I wondered what you thought of it and if you had any input.
It was a terrible, terrible thing. I was brokenhearted by it. I thought it was awful. It started out, it was intended to be a film originally, and then the economy collapsed, and they were afraid. They were fearful. So then they changed it to a TV special, and then they changed it to a series, and then I remember they were asking about who would you like to play Olivia, and this is 7, 8 years ago. No, it's not that long. This is when it was 2007 or something like that. And I said I wanted who's the comedian, the famous female comedian, Lily Tomlin. I wanted her voice as Olivia. So you'd have a really odd voice that could go from little child to just turning in on itself. And they took that. I don't know why. So I wanted her and maybe Jane Curtin to write it if it was going to be a movie. I thought it would be perfect could be perfect for Olivia. And so they took that as to mean I wanted a lesbian. So I got this totally talentless lesbian to write. I can't say her name, but I mean, she really didn't get it, they're just awful. I finally got them to get another writing team, but honestly, I haven't sat through a whole episode of those. I can't bear it. But they'll fade away, and you think of all the things that. Hilary Knight's done some films. You've done film. It's really mostly a disappointment, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's too bad. I don't even know what time it's on. Has anyone in the audience seen it? No one in the audience has seen it, so I guess we're all spared that. I've heard that DreamWorks is maybe doing a movie of Olivia. Is that true?
Yes. We'll see. I don't trust any of them anymore.
Yeah.
Everything I've done always has been all me. I mean, with an opera, of course, it's not all you, but you are doing all the sets or all the costumes or something like that, and you have control over it, and they allow you to do what you want. But when you get tons of money behind something, people get very afraid.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, but that's their business, is making money as much as entertaining.
Yeah, I've had experience in that realm, and it's usually pretty disappointing. Most of the people here in this audience, Ian, as I said before, are oriented toward writing, but I think we'd love to hear a little bit about your set and costume designing. How did you get into that initially? Was that through David Hockney?
Oh, yeah. That was when I was working with David. He asked me to help him. When I first met him, he was doing Parade at the Met. The triple bill of French right. Short operas, and it was Stravinsky and Ravel and I can't remember. And then he did the all Stravinsky evening. It was 3 short Stravinsky pieces. That was when I was first moved out here, and he was working on that in the studio. And then then they asked him to do Turandot, which is a big, massive 4-set costume extravaganza. And he said, "I can't do this alone. You got to help me." And so we did that, and I loved working with him. Loved doing that. And even now, he was looking at this Nutcracker. He said, "Oh, I know what you should do there, love. Oh, move that down a bit." And I was like, "Oh, come stay and help me." But no, he's doing painting now and doesn't want to get back into theater. The trouble with theater is that you do these enormous productions. They do 7 productions of it, 7 performances of it, and it's gone. And there's no way to recapture it. And there's no way to capture the way it was on stage. Even by filming it, it doesn't work.
Even like even the city ballet stuff. Like I saw your one, which I loved, Scène de Ballet, the Christopher Wheeldon one. Don't they bring that back?
They do more because it was he was doing a ballet for the school with lots of children. He wanted it was to showcase the kids. So they usually do it over the Rose Theater, where they do the children's performances, which is slightly scaled down from the big stage. But I did like that set. It was a very, very elaborate set, but it was completely economical. It was just a backdrop and the bars. It was
it was great. It was a fabulous
mirror. It was a mirror illusion of a mirror. In a Russian ballet studio.
Are there similarities to doing all that to creating a book, or is it a totally different thing?
Well, actually, I've been trying to show Chris for months some set design. So I finally made a set model, and a model of this idea that I had for this illusion of this mirror, and he was working on the ballet for the kids, for the school of American Ballet, and he changed the whole choreography because he liked the set so much. So it wasn't. Well, actually, I did the book for Olivia before, and then it's good to finish things and show it to somebody, because if you try and explain things to somebody or try and show them notes or just even sketches, they won't see it. Most people are not very visual, and it's much better for them to see it. I found that at the New Yorker. If I have an idea that I think is really good, do it all. Even if it gets rejected, do it all, because you're much more likely to get it printed. If I send in sketches, she goes, "Oh, but this is so much like the one that so and so did." But no, it's not at all. So you just finish it and show it to them.
Huh.
I don't have the energy to do that all the time anymore, but I used to.
Yeah. Listen, when you're doing sets for an opera or a ballet, do you listen to the music while you're doing it, while you're working? I'm just curious personally about that.
Yes. I think there's something good about slightly dividing your attention when you're working. It's almost like having a companion there, so you don't feel quite so alone and afraid.
Yeah. Let me see what time it is now. Yeah, it's getting. Would you tell us a bit about your current project, which Ian was hired by Pacific Northwest Ballet, which is run by a guy named Peter Boll, who used to be a principal dancer here in New York at New York City Ballet. And they, years ago, maybe 20 years ago, a lot of my family is from Seattle, so I kind of know about Pacific Northwest Ballet. They did a production of The Nutcracker with sets by Maurice Sendak. And now, how long ago was that, Ian?
The Sendak sets I think, are now 30 years old.
30 years old, yeah. So they've been around a really long time. And they've asked Ian to replace them now that Sendak's dead.
That's terrifying. I mean, this is a beloved production that generations of children and their parents grew up with. But Peter wants to do it with the Balanchine choreography, which, if you don't know, there was not the Nutcracker was performed for something like 2 or 3 years in St. Petersburg in 1897, and it wasn't ever a big success. And Balanchine revived it in 1957, virtually doing it for the first time since it had been choreographed, except for once in 1938, the Royal Ballet did a thing that fizzled miserably. But anyway, he did this. He did this in 1957, and he soon realized that it was a great moneymaker for the company. And it's a beautiful production. The dancing is beautiful. The choreography is amazing. And unfortunately, the Sendak production just isn't that good. The choreography isn't that good. It's not. But the Balanchine one is a real Imperial Russian Christmas card. It's a wonderful, beautifully done thing. So I have to, but I can improve on, I think, a little bit on Ruben Tarartunian's sets, which I don't think they had all that much money when they first did it. And they're also looking a little bit shabby. But.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to show a few. You're going to disappear again for a second. Okay. And I'm going to show a few of your set mock-ups that you sent me the other day. Maybe I'll get you to comment on them. Hang on a second. I'm showing them the one. It must be the first act. It's the big family room.
Yeah.
There's a little girl in there that has a sort of red striped dress that looks very familiar. It's like an Ian Falconer.
Peter asked for some hint of Olivia in the character, so I didn't go for red.
It's really beautiful. I love the settee in the back and the
little Biedermeier.
Yeah. Why is there a ceiling molding on the floor?
He wanted a ground cloth. And a ground cloth is really hard to change quickly in between acts. It's a huge, probably 70 by 60 feet cloth that gets rolled down and painted on top. So it had to be something that would go throughout all the acts. And the ceiling molding, so it goes with the ceiling, but it could be also a rug. I might put an oval line around it just to make it more rug-like.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I see that.
But then it also works as a snowflake in the snow scene. Can be a snow pattern, and then whatever in the third act. But it sort of goes with all 3 acts. If I put an oriental carpet there or an aubusson, it would look really silly in the snow scene.
Yeah. And you have the clock for Drosselmeyer, like in the Balanchine.
Yeah, he's got to get up there and flap his wings.
Now I moved to, this must be like the Candyland one in the second act.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's really going to be fun to see.
Actually, you can see there are three ceiling moldings on the floor, as you call it. Yeah. It's the first one is the stage. And behind that are projections repeating the stage, which we will do with moving videotapes so that people can go across on the back of the stage, waiters holding big cakes on trays and things like that, with a feeling of depth. Because that's the one thing on stage which it's really hard to do is to get you can't do it with just a painted perspective.
A scrim, yeah.
You have to have some movement back there. And I did this in Paris on this operetta that I did, Veronique, which we used, and we actually filmed on a river in this tributary of the Seine, people rowing and willow trees blowing gently in the wind. You could see movement in the leaves and stuff, and it went beautifully with the set of this outdoor garden restaurant. But it was like air coming in. It was an amazing effect. So I'm trying to get that here too.
Wow. Yeah, I heard Veronique was real success. Now I'm showing the little girl with the red and white striped dress.
Yes, that's a close-up of me.
Because Ian's doing both the costumes and the sets for this Nutcracker. There's another one of her. And there's her with some of the grown-ups. And out the window, you can see the winter scene. Beautiful.
Yeah, this is early stages here. So
Yeah, great. Anyway, we're going to bring you back. So maybe, it's getting near the end of our time, Ian. I think maybe I bet you some of these people have questions for you. I'm going to open this up to the audience. Is there anybody out there who'd like to have a question for Ian? Yeah, you have to use a microphone so Ian can hear you.
Hi, Ian. Thanks
Hello.
for answering questions. I loved the very first book that came out. As soon as I found out about it, saw a few pictures on TV or something, went out, read it, got it, loved it, and still have it. I have no kids. And I'm wondering, do you have a lot of people who love your books, buy your books, and have no kids? Maybe not even, I have nieces and nephews, but maybe not even nieces and nephews. They just get them for their own pure enjoyment.
yes, I have had people come up. I have all your books, but I don't have any kids myself, but I just love them. I even have had a couple of people who collect pigs.
Thank you.
Hi, I do have a kid, and I've read to her a couple of your stories. I guess this is more of a comment, but I'll try and make it into a question. One of the spreads that I really love in the first one is where she's figuring out what to wear, and there's this whole grid of her trying on all these different outfits, and it's so revealing to her character. But in it, I always find myself, in reading it, I don't remember if there's words on the page, but I really want to draw attention to the energy in each and every outfit that's there. So I have to kind of make up sound effects for each one, like ta-da, 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 So I was wondering if you think about
Do you do
sound.
that when you're reading it to somebody?
Yeah. I feel like I'm obliged to sing out the outfit. So I don't know if you thought about that when you were making them, because it's very different than if you're just looking at a static image or if you're just reading the text that's there. So I don't know, it's kind of a weird question, but if you think about sound as an element, because she's such a lively character in drawing.
Do I think about sound as an element?
Yeah, sound, like if it's really just a visual and there isn't text driving that. If you yourself kind of imagine, and I don't know, looking at some of your set design, it seems very theatrical.
I don't know, since I've worked so much in the ballet that I think gesture and stuff can suggest sound, but I don't think about it in my head. I don't think ever, but it's more like a pantomime.
Maybe you should do a test and see if people make up sounds on that one spread, because it seems to really encourage that.
Oh, it got really hard to figure out. I'm doing this grid of all these different outfits, and I run out of ideas about 2/3 of the way through. So you really have to.
And it's all with just red, right? Red and white,
The first one, is red, white, and black.
Yeah.
White. Then I slowly add color each book.
I noticed that, Ian.
Hi, Ian. Thank you so much for bringing your work into the world. I think your picture books elevated what picture books, are trying to still do today. But I have a question about how you work when you're developing your storyline, and whether or not you share that with people. Do you share with your editor? Do you have readers? Do you just sort of trust your own judgment in terms of writing your story?
Pretty much trust my own judgment. Sometimes I'll think, I've got this great idea for this. What do you think? But mostly, I trust my own judgment. And I try and get it done before I show it to the editor, because, again, like showing New Yorker stuff to people when it's not finished, they'll start to niggle and quibble about this little. Why don't you just change? No, this is the way it is. This or the way I want it. This is the way it should be. Does that answer anything?
Hi, I wanted to go back to your restrained palette. Was that your idea from the start to do a very restrained palette with just a few colors, and was that a hard sell for the publisher?
Yes, it was. When I was thinking about turning it into a real book, instead of just this little thing for my niece, I went and looked around went to the bookstores and looked around the children's book sections, and so many of them are screaming for your attention by throwing all these colors at you and all this busyness and all this detail and all this stuff, and that's not what you want if you want to really express looking at if you want the face to express stuff, you can't be distracted by all this other stuff. You want some really delicate expressions in the face that show you what she's thinking. And also, I thought they were ugly, all these children's books.
No, I think it's really lovely.
So this is a question along the lines of publishing. What do you think in terms of ebooks? And what's your take on that, since you have so many out physical? Do you think there's a new wave in terms of ebooks? Do you think that future publishers and writers for children books should be concerned with that? Do you think that we should be thinking in terms of these physical books and kind of the beauty about them, or really just kind of moving forward into the ebook world?
It's going to happen whether you want it to or not, or I want it to or not. I mean, on the one hand, it makes a whole lot of stuff available, instantly. It's the format is very small on a Kindle or a iPad. It's not as good as and if you want to they've done some. You can get them on Kindle isn't in color, but on the iPad you can get some Olivia books in color. But to get the 2-page spread, they have to turn it sideways, which reduces the page by half, the page size by half.
Right.
And it's not that great.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
So it also cut my book sales in half by.
It cut them in half?
Well, the book sales dropped by
Yeah,
half.
Definitely.
The Kindle and iPad came out.
Right.
Well, that was also the economy, but it's really upset the publishing business. And if a book is being sold, this is getting.
Sorry.
The book is being sold. Say Olivia is on Amazon for $12.95, in the bookstore for $17.95 or something, and you get $1 a book. When the book is reduced to $2.99 on Kindle, you're not going to get $1 out of that.
Right.
So,
do you think that you're thinking now in terms of the integrity of your book and the pages and the color and just the beauty about the physical book, and now having to kind of translate that into something that's completely just technological?
It certainly is better. Better for a parent to read a physical book.
Absolutely.
And to be able to go back a page and then and stare at it for a long time, and to get chocolate all over it. And
so you think we should move forward and still continue to try for our books, for our physical books? I think so, at least.
People do buy books, but sometimes these things are temporary distractions, like ebook or whatever. But sometimes that's a real change that it will never go back. But I don't know what's going to happen. We'll have to watch.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
But it's not the same business it was 10 years ago. So go ahead.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one last question for you, Ian. I'm going to make you disappear for a second.
Okay.
Do you mind disappearing for a second?
Okay.
I'm showing an image of your. This really makes me jealous because as a kid, I was a nerdy stamp collector. I'm showing an image of your Olivia stamp. How is how is that when the stamp came out? That must be so cool to have a stamp come out that has your character on it.
It was a really nice. They did it really nicely too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like the book, no border, nothing. It's yeah. I have a little one in a frame.
Yeah, the only thing that could be better is it should be a forever stamp, since I think Olivia will probably last forever. But on that note, we all want to thank you very much for taking the time to be back in your
Well,
old
thank you.
neighborhood.
Thank you all very much.
And it was really fun. And thank you, Ian.
You can turn me off.
So now you can go back to work on your sets.
Okay, you can have a cigarette.